On day 2 of the 2025 Trinidad and Tobago Internet Governance Forum. So far in the forum, we've had some really great sessions and discussions. The speakers from the opening session really set the stage for multi-stakeholder discussion on the theme, Building Our Multi-Stakeholder Digital Future. We heard from the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Trinidad and Tobago, who presented some of the initiatives that they are undertaking in partnership with organizations in Trinidad and Tobago supporting the multi-stakeholder approach. These included key projects like the Developers Hub, the National E-Identity Project, and the digital learning program We Learn. Sally Wentworth, CEO of the Internet Society, stressed the importance of multi-stakeholder action in shaping the Internet's future, and the role of the Internet Society and the Internet Society Foundation in supporting those multi-stakeholder projects. Javed Sajjad, a speaker from LACNIC, who's another partner of the TTIGF, discussed the concept of AI sandboxes for testing AI solutions and the importance of ethical compliance and risk mitigation. We followed that with the AI in Education panel, with Dr. Lev Gonik from Arizona State University and Dr. Andrew Hunt from the University of the West Indies. They discussed the role of AI in supporting new education paradigms and practices. We were also shown some of the fantastic AI tools and projects that Arizona State University is implementing. The presentation by Ajmal Nazir on cybersecurity emphasized the importance of understanding key standards such as ISO 27001, NIST 853, and NIST CSF 2.0. This session also covered the significance of the security risks associated with platforms like WordPress, recommending more secure alternatives. The complexity of a security operations center and its resource requirements were also discussed. The open forum featured a very energizing discussion where speakers addressed the challenges of reaching governments and international organizations. There was acknowledgement of progress in the Caribbean with some success stories in specific countries. The discussion also explored support for local CCTLDs and the importance of regional collaboration, as well as opportunities for new GTLDs. There was also a discussion on the potential of data centers to make Trinidad and Tobago a regional hub and the need for a regional data protection regime. The potential for quantum computing and AI in the Caribbean was also raised, highlighting the need for collaboration. This morning, the very well-attended youth forum supported by RSC, Restore a Sense of I Can, demonstrated the use of an AI chatbot that engaged with and answered students' questions on the topic of cyberbullying. And that leads us to this afternoon session. We will first hear about digital transformation and financial inclusion. We will then hear a presentation of award-winning research on using AI for disaster relief in Trinidad and Tobago, and wrap up with a session on accelerating the involvement of Caribbean country top-level domains within the global CCTLD community. So with that, we introduce the panel for digital transformation and financial inclusion. Gentlemen, take your seat. Here's up to you. You got the microphones there, I guess. There's another microphone there. You don't necessarily want to go screen. But you'll be sitting. Yeah, I already. Digital transformation and financial inclusion, exploring the impact of digital transformation on the economy and how to ensure financial inclusion in the digital age. Our panelists will be Alleyne, founder of Paywise. Do you want me to say the Alleyne? Ian T. Alleyne, founder of Paywise Limited. It's a licensed electronic money issuer. Prior to starting the company, he worked for 9 years in the IT industry, pursued a master's in business administration, and thereafter worked for 13 years in the finance and banking sector. In 2009, he started lecturing at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, teaching business and entrepreneurial courses. He started Paywise in 2013 to provide cash payment services to small businesses. And in 2022, Paywise became the first company to be granted an electronic money issuer license by the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. Shortly thereafter, Paywise launched its mobile wallet app. The vision of Paywise is to improve financial inclusion using innovative digital solutions that are safe, affordable, and convenient. We also have Mr. Shiva Bissessar, Managing Director of Pinaka Consulting. With a background in strategic ICT and information security, Shiva pioneered digital currency research and retail CBDC implementation in the Caribbean. His work in fintech began with an MSc thesis tracing Bitcoin transaction flows in 2013. He later conducted socioeconomic research into the advent of digital currency in the Caribbean. He served as program manager and strategic advisor on the ECCB's retail CDBC pilot project DCash from 2019 to 2024. In 2023, he led a 9-month research project performing technical mapping of illicit virtual asset usage within 15 Caribbean states, which included review of VA and VASP legislation and regulation. John Outridge is the CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago International Finance Center. He is responsible for leading the company as it executes its mandate of driving digital financial services adoption across all sectors so Trinidad and Tobago can become a premier location for fintech-enabled services and maintain its position as a financial hub of the region. He has over 10 years of senior management experience and has worked for firms such as EY and PricewaterhouseCoopers. He has supported both public and private sector institutions with strategic guidance, fintech strategies, as well as the modernization of public financial management systems for various governments throughout the region. He holds a Master of Small and Medium Enterprise Management from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business, Diploma from the University of Cambridge FinTech and Regulatory Innovation Program, Diploma in Governance and Public Innovation for Leaders of Latin America and the Caribbean from the University of West Indies, Cave School of Business, and he currently lectures on programs relating to digital and technology management for the University of Bedfordshire. John is also the Deputy Chair of the American Chamber of Commerce Digital Transformation Subcommittee. Our moderator is Ajmal Nazir, Director of TTMAG. He is a renowned cybersecurity expert. And if you didn't hear his presentation yesterday, it's recorded and available to view on YouTube. It was brilliant. He has over 3 decades of industry experience. He's celebrated for his profound contributions to cybersecurity, governance, and digital transformation. His extensive expertise and leadership have earned him a place on the board of directors for the ISC2 Caribbean chapter, where he plays a pivotal role in advancing cybersecurity initiatives across the region. Ajmal is highly certified, holding credentials such as CISSP, CISM, ISO 27001 lead implementer and auditor, COBIT design and implementation, and multiple MITRE ATT&CK certifications. These qualifications highlight his commitment to maintaining the highest standards of cybersecurity and compliance. So let me hand over to Ajmal and let's hear all about.
Welcome everyone, and today for the next 9 minutes, we're going to speak to Shiva and Ian, and we're going to explore the fintech industry as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago. So we're going to dive straight in, and I want to open up by asking a question to Ian, just to give us in your opinion, a brief rundown of the last 10 years of fintech and how it's evolved in Trinidad.
Over the last 10 years, there has been significant development within the fintech industry. seeing that prior to that period, financial services were more the view of the traditional financial institutions. Since then, there has been legislation that has been introduced to support the introduction of fintech services in the industry. And there has been several licenses that have been issued to electronic money issuer entities to operate and to promote fintech services within the country. In addition, we've had the development and introduction of the TTIFC, which has been spearheading the development of the industry and supporting the players in the industry in several ways. In addition to that, there are several other dependencies that have been developing within the country, such as the government moving to digitize payments within the public sector, and several other types of institutions like the credit unions and as you would have seen in the news recently, seeking to be more forward and to adopt more and more fintech strategies and approaches. So I think over the last 10 years, there has been significant development, more so within the last few years, but over the period, one can say that there has been gradual but positive progression within the fintech space, and we're going forward.
Right. Thank you for that. And then a similar question to Shiva. I know you've been playing around in the blockchain and fintech side and CBDC aspects. How have you seen that progress over the last same period, 8 to 10 years?
Yeah. Well, blockchain is just one technology. I think the importance of blockchain is that it solved a problem with electronic money, which was the double spend problem. And since then, it's found, and that was manifest within the Bitcoin academic paper 2008, 2009, thereabouts, and the advent of Bitcoin thereafter. Since then, blockchain has been employed in other spaces, not just payment. And in fact, even with Bitcoin, it's primarily not used to transfer value. It's used as to hoard, basically, to retain capital gain, basically, over a period of time. So blockchain technology is just one aspect of digital financial services and fintech. But over the past 10 years, yes, we've seen an expansion there. Definitely within the Caribbean, we've seen uptake of different types of projects or deployment of different types of projects I would explore. Digital financial services and fintech, just utilizing the technology beyond just as a technical means to deliver a public good. And I think that's the important part. The important part is not so much the technology itself, but what is the public good that we are delivering on? If it's payments, if it's credit instruments, if it's digital identity, the technology is just that technical layer upon which you deliver that good. And it's all part of digital public infrastructure. And there are a lot of projects taking place within the Caribbean. In Trinidad and Tobago as well, digital public infrastructure has been built to improve payment systems, well, to improve digital identity, and then layer upon that payment systems to facilitate better, faster, cheaper means by which payments can take place.
Right. Thank you for that. And we're just going to reach out to John Outridge, who's the CEO of the TTIFC. He's remotely, he's attending remotely. Similar question to you, John. I know this started off in the private sector, small projects, and the whole crypto was a roller coaster ride back in 2016, 17, 18. But since then, obviously, all governments have recognized the importance of e-payment systems and a different way of doing transactions. And Trinidad and Tobago has been no different. And hence, they've dedicated resources and you're responsible for now some of the fintech evolution in Trinidad. So from your perspective, how would you see the last 5 years and where we are at the moment in terms of fintech in Trinidad?
Yeah, afternoon, and thanks for that. And I think Ian said it best, right? I mean, even when I took the role 3 years ago, there wasn't a lot of progress, quite frankly, being made around fintech. But one of the things that was very positive, particularly from the state side, was the fact that the entire mandate of the TTIFC was solely shifted to focus on enabling fintech within Trinidad and Tobago for a couple of reasons. One, because fintech was definitely seen as a big enabler for digital transformation. It was really seen as that last mile, right? It was the value proposition as to why somebody would want to get online, either to get paid, to pay, to really be part of that socioeconomic aspect of it, right? The other aspect, obviously, was to facilitate trade, right? And this is where, the mandate of the TTIFC sort of saw fintech as being the tip of the spear, but behind that spear, there were two main drivers that needed also to be strengthened at the same time to really, create the demand, because, you have Ian there and you have Shiva there. And, since I've been in here, the amount of fintech companies that we have seen starting up in Trinidad and Tobago, and the real equation is how do you get that critical mass for them to really make economic sense, right? But in order to do that is you need to have the customers, because the Caribbean as a whole is a small market, particularly for fintech, right? It only makes sense when you start to speak about transaction volumes, right? And obviously, a big percentage of that is obviously if you do have people in the formal financial system, you don't have any customers. So financial inclusion levels have to go up, right? A second part of that is, governments, not just in Trinidad, but across the Caribbean, they are the largest merchants. So if they themselves are not adopting the technologies in a rapid enough fashion, then what you find happening is that, you could have all of the shops outside of a government office accepting digital payments, but then when you have to go and make a government transaction, you have to go with cash. You're defeating the purpose, right? So these three things need to come hand in hand, right? But I have seen a lot of progress to date, and Ian has sort of pointed at not just on the implementation side, but even on the policy side where we are, right? So, just to touch quickly, we actually have a financial inclusion strategy and roadmap that's before the Ministry of Finance for approval, which will basically kind of lead in to some of these things that Shiva was speaking about with UPI, having a inclusive, low cost, efficient, fast payment system. Hello?
Yep.
Oh,
right.
Okay. Yeah. So that is a big, huge policy enabler, right? At this point in time, we're also looking at having a national fintech policy, because fintech should be seen as, I would say, having its own sort of focus as it relates to playing part not just in the state operations, but in private sector, because everything now is e-commerce enabled, right? We speak about e-commerce as a distinct function. Payments, right? It's the entire ecosystem of any technology that supports finance, right? All the way from onboarding, all the way to artificial intelligence and so forth, So those are the things that we are also kind of playing focus with. And one of the major initiatives that's going to be coming later this year is that Trinidad and Tobago is at the final stages of becoming a member of what you call the Better Than Cash Alliance, which is a United Nations global alliance that is basically constituted of member countries who are formally putting forward the fact that, we want to move forward into this more aggressive state of enabling digital payments. So the fact that you have a country going at that level to make that sort of move, it means that you are committed to make certain progress and put certain resources behind doing that. So, I think the next 3 years is what's going to be more important than the last 3.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. And that also leads me into the next question, which is that when we're talking about inclusion and critical mass, one of the things that keeps coming up is the unbanked. So my question is, does digital transformation or fintech technology now make it easier for the unbanked to get involved and get into that socio-economic space and take advantages of the new technology and new ways of doing either business or transactions, such as e-commerce and online? And that's for John. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. It's definitely not a technology problem. And where Shiva sits there, I could see him probably nodding in his head because, you know, eKYC has been something that's been around for years, right? You have no shortage of those applications. I think the challenge, particularly with our region, is that the regulations hasn't caught up in terms of what the technology can do, you know, because simply applying for an account online, you know, there is still friction depending on which institution you go to, which sector you go to. You know, as we were talking just recently, we did an MOU with the credit union sector. So they have a different regulator than the banks, right? The central bank regulate the banks, and for the credit union sector, their major regulator is the FIU, which really just deals with the anti-money laundering KYC aspect of things, right? So I would say it really depends on the industry, but on the regulation side, there is so much supporting pieces that need to come together, you know. So like, I'll just give you, for example, Republic Bank just recently launched a completely virtual onboarding solution to open an account. And, you know, so far, you know, they have gotten about quite a number of subscribers in the thousands utilizing it, right? But there are still gaps in that system. You know, for example, if you are when you start to go through, if you are a dual citizen, for example, you would realize the application shuts down and you have to visit a branch, you know, because you still have regulatory hoops that you need to sort of satisfy. You know, it's almost like, okay, I reached one stage and it's like, okay, I checked this box and it flags something else, you know, but, you know, that is just the ecosystem that we have to kind of refine in, right? And obviously having that central e-identifier will definitely reduce a lot of that friction and so forth, right? So it is a mixed bag of, and I think that's the biggest problem we have with the unbanked, right? There's too much friction for them to get into the system. You know, this is why guys like Ian and them, in terms of Paywise and providing those branchless agents, where somebody doesn't have to go through those hoops, you know, where they could do a simplified form of KYC, give cash to an agent and put it on their wallet. I think that is going to be the secret for the unbanked, because friction and documentation will continue to be a hindrance to them.
Right, thanks. Ian, you have anything to add on the unbanked? Is that where we expect to see our critical mass coming from for the fintech?
The unbanked represents a large untapped market. I just want to piggyback on what John has said in terms of the regulations. Earlier this week, we were talking to the central bank regarding onboarding and the onboarding process. And they reiterated the fact that there's simplified due diligence now, whereby someone is allowed to sign up with only one ID. And many persons, once they reach 17, 18, they would obtain a national ID. So that form of ID now is sufficient now for a fintech entity to provide citizens of the country with access to financial resources. So it's now for the fintechs to harmonize that into their system and capitalize that to bring the unbanked into the financial space. And in so doing, the onboarding process can be simplified. Once you get over that hurdle, the next thing now is to provide them with the services that they require. As I mentioned, this fintech market represents a large untapped market, but since that they have been out of the financial circles, out of, let's say, contact with technology, fintechs may find it a bit of a challenge for them to embrace this form of technology because it's new to them. And for them to embrace it, you may find that education may be a great aspect of the fintech's thrust. Okay, so the marketing has to be one that incorporates a level of education to enable people to become familiarized with technology and familiarized and comfortable with dealing, transferring their finances from physical cash onto a digital platform.
Right. Okay, so
Okay. And then within the Caribbean, each territory have a different version of what the Untitled is. And it's really good that TTIFC has put out this FinTech National Inclusion Survey, Financial Inclusion Survey, as to what our needs may look like from a financial inclusion perspective. For the Eastern Caribbean, when we did the Dcash project, the unbanked, we had two versions of the wallets. So we had a version being put out by licensed financial institutions for their customers, and we had a version that was put out specifically for persons off the street who may not have a bank account. And actually, that second wallet simplified due diligence. You had less identity requirements to obtain that wallet, but there's a corresponding lessening of the thresholds and the limits that you could use that wallet to transact with. And that wallet actually had a higher uptake than the registered based wallet, which was from the licensed financial institution. So that's all to say that there is an opportunity there, but it is for each territory to define what is that opportunity within your particular island. As John mentioned, the frictions and the documentation, those may be contributing factors to the unbanked, but the definition of unbanked changes with each territory. And having something like a financial inclusion survey is important, so you address those specific areas. And mention was made about automated KYC. That is a boon. That is a good thing, and not having to do paper-based KYC to obtain an account. That is definitely a good thing, but increasingly now what we're seeing is it comes at risks. So I don't know if you have a cybersecurity question coming up later, but we'll talk a little bit more about some of the cybersecurity risks at remote onboarding later on, I suppose.
Right. So continuing on from there, what are the benefits that different stakeholders are expected to see in the evolution of fintech? So, I mean, I look at it from my perspective, and I think a lot of people will be able to resonate that, look, I have my salary going into my bank account. I have a credit card. If I didn't have a credit card, before there was an issue when we had the Links card where you could not do any online transactions. But now, since they converted across to Visa, the online shopping aspect of it has become a lot more easier and feasible. From businesses, as a software developer, we used to try to encourage a lot of businesses to start selling online, but they always asked, well, how many people have got credit cards? So that question is no longer being asked. So with those recent changes taking place and the Links converting to Visa, what benefits are there to be expected from the fintech and the new way of doing transactions and business? Shiva, you want to go with that first?
I thought you would give that one to John because he's closer to Visa than I am. But what I would like to see take place is, and I mean, I don't want to single out the entity that you call, but when we get to the point of account-to-account transactions, we kind of bypass some of these third parties, or we bypass some of these traditional players. And so there's an opportunity there to, within fast payment systems or instant payment systems, to move past some of these traditional payment rails. And you can transfer direct from one account to the next. But that is still to come. And I mean, Trinidad and Tobago, we're exploring as John mentioned, the UPI from India is part of retail payment system innovation It is a fast payment system. It has proven to be very transformational in India and in, for example, Brazil, where Brazil had PIX. The one that we're going with would be UPI from India. So Visa per se offers certain benefits. As the context you put it in is that, we moved away from a local type clearinghouse facility to a facility now which has a international payment rail connected to it, Visa. But there are other benefits down the road now that we can see with direct account-to-account payments, which is still to come.
The introduction of the Visa debit card, chip debit cards, serve two main purposes. One, from the banking point of view, was a security element to it. As you would know, the previous cards were not chip-based, mark stripe only, and as a result of that, you had a lot of swiping of people's pins. So the chip card eliminated that. The benefit to the consumer was the ability now to use that card online. Well, higher level of security, one, and the ability to use it online. We have seen some uptake, some use of it online, but the level of activity needs to be increased. What I would like to see coming as maybe the second phase is where fintech entities can now maybe partner with banks to issue their own cards, so that the fintech accounts, similar to the bank accounts, will have a Visa debit card associated with them. This will help in terms of promoting e-commerce, greater digital payments, and especially giving the unbanked a level of financial service and encouragement that they have not had in the past. So I think the Visa debit card has been a great introduction, but it must not stop where it is right now. Must be extended to what fintechs to really and truly assist in this drive to digitize payments and the financial system further.
Right. And so, John, that leads me on to the next question, which is on open banking. Is it on the horizon?
Well, I'll go back to what Shiva was saying, just to kind of round up, the big infrastructure projects that we are dealing with, right? So if you kind of looked where and what open banking really means, right? Everything we are talking about here in relation to the unbanked and fintech, particularly as we focusing on what I would say, the flow of money, right, is already predicated on rails, right? What rails are the best fit for purpose for what we are dealing, and those main barriers, right? Now, one of the main barriers is obviously cost, right? So we use Visa sometimes interchangeably because, Trinidad, quite frankly, is Visa country, right? 98% market penetration, right? We have over 1 million cards issued by all institutions locally, right? The challenge is, and Ian was sort of saying it, is there is a supply chain cost for moving money along those rails, right? From the merchant who has to spend the money and the acquirer, right? Who has to, on that end, right? So there is a cost at every point. Now, in terms of from what you were saying from the open banking, and this was a problem, the OACS was trying to solve when they did their sort of CBDC pilot, not only from the cost side, but also geographically, right? Trying to get access to persons who were in remote areas, right? And obviously having something digital that's easy to use and pervasive to get it's an approach to that, right? What we do in here in Trinidad and Tobago, open banking would be very difficult to implement just by the nature of it, right? Because what that really means is that me, John Outridge, or you, or anybody here, you have the freedom of basically, your account information, being able to share that openly, across the entire institution. We know our commercial banking sector doesn't operate that way. It's a very, very highly competitive sector, right? We have a very, very small market. We have 8 commercial banks operating, open banking from an infrastructure concept, yeah, sounds good. From a practical implementation concept would be a little difficult. So how to solve that? And this is where the advent of the fast payment systems came into play, right? So if you can't solve that, the account side, at least having a ubiquitous rail that's one, cost effective, but to give you the advantages of open banking, because right now I think the challenges for our payment system is it's not real time. If you have to do trade with someone and you have to do a bank transfer, it could be 24 hours, it could be 48 hours, it could be 72 hours, right? It depending. There's no transparency within the process, right? What the real-time payment system allows you to do, you make the transaction, it happens instantaneously. So you take away the anxiety and you basically give that sort of autonomy to that person being able to make that transaction. So open banking as a concept, like for Ian's perspective, right? I think the idea is that you will be providing a playing field where it's level to all providers, meaning that a fintech can plug into that open banking framework and that fintech's customers can do business with other customers within that entire sector, right? Now, as I said, in our context, a lot more difficult to implement. However, going on the other end of the supply chain, if you have an alternative payment rails that is not operated by the banking sector, but basically is accessible to the entire financial ecosystem, banking sector, credit union, and fintechs, then what that gives a provider like Ian is a rail that, one, is affordable, that's connected into the ecosystem, and where he has the ability now to set market rates, that is independent of the institution to be a little more competitive. And then now what you have is really more a competition on features and functionalities and service, So that is the sort of approach being taken, not just here, but in other different jurisdictions, because as I said, open banking really was kind of started to kind of provide those sort of benefits, but you would find in like emerging markets like ours where you simply don't have that sort of maturity. The rise of instant payment rails, is sort of taking hold, as Shiva mentioned, in Brazil, in Pakistan, just recently in Paraguay and so forth, and now, Trinidad, and we also have Jamaica, Guyana, also looking at it.
Right. So following on from that, recently we've seen some press releases on UPI. Can you bring us up to speed on what is UPI and what the sort of timelines and the plans are for UPI in Trinidad?
So what UPI is really is just like how we are familiar with our InfoLink network, where persons have a payment rail where I have a card and I can make a transaction, right? And that transaction happens electronically. UPI is, it's a payment rail, but the difference with UPI, the real distinction from other sorts of services, it's a fast payment rail and it's open source, right? And it's interoperable. That was the intention. The reason why India did it, just like Trinidad and Tobago, India more or less kind of had a similar journey to Trinidad and Tobago, obviously at scale. They themselves went through a demonetization exercise, right? They were dealing with a lot of heavy cash usage. They had the banks obviously operating at different levels. They had a lot of high fees, so persons, weren't able to provide those perspectives. So what UPI really is for Trinidad and Tobago is to provide an alternative payment rail, right, to be used primarily by the fintechs to provide that person-to-person money transfer sort of facility, as well as support micro merchants. Simple use case, for example, a doubles vendor, which is the classic example, $6 for a doubles, right? Most banks not going to give a doubles vendor a links machine, right? The volumes, that's not going to make sense. But he can simply have a QR code, right? That QR code could be accessible by Ian's wallet. So I don't have cash on me. I could pay for that doubles, and the transaction cost would be a fraction as to what, the doubles would have to be on, right? So that's a use case for Trinidad and Tobago, right? Providing a low cost transaction mechanism for merchants and persons who are looking to provide. In terms of timelines, up to December, we actually had the team from UPI and Trinidad and Tobago. They were looking at the landscape. They visited different players, the banks. We had meetings with fintechs, credit unions, different stakeholders. So right now, it's at the point of functional requirements, because what UPI is really a vanilla switching platform, but you have different functionalities, bill payments, person-to-person payments. You could even do subscription payments. So right now, they're sort of fine-tuning what would be the right use cases or the right flavor of that UPI that will drive the mass adoption in Trinidad and Tobago. But based on what the central bank has been communicating, there's expected to be some sort of pilot, between April and May later this year. And that might just simply be a technical pilot, to make sure that, the transaction can move at the speed and settlement and reconciliation, all these things can happen.
Right. So, Ian, a question on the same topic for you. John said that, look, this UPI will provide a rail for the fintechs and stuff. Is it complementary to the fintechs, or is it a competing technology? Are you in the private sector welcoming it?
Definitely. It complements what the fintechs and they are pursuing. In fact, it solves one of the biggest problems that fintechs face, and that is the cost of onboarding money onto the platform. Okay, there are several means in which money can come onto the platform. You can have cash, you can have bank transfers, and you can have, let's say, via a card payment. You find that a card payment network is expensive. Cash also is expensive because of the handling and related cost. Bank transfers are inexpensive, but as John indicated, they are not instant. So it takes maybe about a day or two for the funds to be registered in the fintech's account. And people's desire for transferring money to have that immediate access to the value that they have transferred. So having a UPI system that can guarantee immediate access to funds is essential. Key to that also is its ability to connect institutions that may not have had payment services or payment infrastructure as the UPI would offer, like the credit unions and so on. So with that introduction of the UPI and let's say the adoption of the UPI, let's say by the credit union movement, etc., you would find that fintechs would be able to provide a level of service to the credit unions to bring them on par with what, let's say, the banks and they currently enjoy. Of course, also, it would be quite a good thing to have the banks also connected so that people now have the freedom to move their money from institution to institution and to conduct retail payments in a more convenient and faster fashion.
Right. Shiva, what's your uptake on UPI?
Yeah, any sort of retail payment system innovation is welcomed. It will bring benefit to, as John described, the fintechs to make their solutions interoperable. So a client from Ian's shop be able to pay a client from John X's shop. So, all good. Right.
John mentioned that we're looking to do a pilot, hopefully, let's say April, May. That seems like an aggressive timeline, a welcomed timeline, but he did put in the caveats that it was for a technical sort of proof of concept, which, I'm pretty confident if they've got it working in India, then, we can do that proof of concept. However, in our earlier conversations, when we were speaking, you were saying, look, there's certain other infrastructure that needs to be in place for us to be able to take advantage of what UPI can offer. And one of those is digital identities, right? So, Ian, can you just give us a bit more information on why you think that could be an issue or what we should do to deal with that? And then we'll go across to John to see what he thinks.
I think, okay, so India has the digital identity. I know that is being pursued here, but in the meantime, what do we have? We have persons that have a national ID. We have the simplified due diligence, where fintechs can now legally onboard someone with one form of ID. Everyone has a national ID. So, and also you have the electronic onboarding or digital onboarding third-party services out there. So combining those services which support fast onboarding together with the sole requirement to have one particular ID and the simplified due diligence process, I think we can not really circumvent, but we can get over that hurdle that digital IDs present. Okay, we can still be able to onboard persons quite quickly and not have any restrictions because of, let's say, documentation requirements.
Right. So, John, like your input on that, we keep hearing about the KYC being an obstacle for a lot of the onboarding or representing friction. And we've also spoken about digital identity in Trinidad, and I've heard of projects over the last couple of years. Does the lack of digital identity mean that, look, what we could do is go down the UPI route, but it's harder for it to succeed because we've introduced friction because there's a lack of digital identity, and whatever solutions we're trying to implement are just introducing the same problems that we've got, which is, okay, look, how do we get past these KYC friction?
No, not necessarily, because even if you realize in India now, you don't necessarily need to have an Aadhaar ID to use UPI, right? Because the financial sector has its own set of rules and regulations, and it's the same thing that Ian is describing, right? The real success measure in these systems is adoption and usage, right? And what Ian described is correct, right? It's really friction. If you think about us now, we talk about the unbanked, right? But let's look at ourselves. Like, I would never go online and subscribe to a service where I can't use either my pre-existing Google or my Hotmail or my Outlook to simply do that automated form of capture, right? I'm not starting to fill out a form from scratch. I immediately get turned off and going away to another service, yeah? That is the same sort of experience 100-fold for the unbanked, meaning that if I have to go on Ian's platform and I need to go home and get a photocopy of my birth certificate or a photocopy of my passport and then onboard that all we're talking about here with the EID is really moving the effort somewhere else. It doesn't create the friction for the end user, What the EID would really do is, because the point about getting the EID is that I have this number or I have this authenticator that says John Outridge is who he says. And there's a database to validate that where my documentation resides. So I don't have to provide that time and time again. Meaning that if I go into Ian's app and I put in my EID number, then at least that takes care of the onboarding process, And I think that is the biggest friction point because, believe it or not, it's a systemic issue, not just here, but in a number of different places, right? Most persons, and the simplified due diligence was a really important move by the central bank because, before to open a bank account, you needed 2 forms of ID and a utility bill. And, just to add to the anecdotes, and they might say your blood type and the name of your dog and all these other different things, right? But you really just need one form of ID and a utility bill, right? To open a bank account in today's financial environment, which most people have, because I think people take it for granted. We have 3 different forms of ID that we use in Trinidad and Tobago, and a combination of the 2 is what people recognize. But a lot of people don't have passports. A lot of people have never left Trinidad and Tobago. I think it's like 160,000 people have passports in Trinidad and Tobago, right? Of our population of 1.4, right? I could be misquoting there, right? A lot of people don't have ID cards. When your ID card expires, there's no need for you to go back and renew your ID card. So it's really a non-functional, if you have to vote, that's really the main issue. So your main form of ID at most point might be a DP, but then a lot of people don't drive, right? So you kind of have segments of the population with different combinations of the 2, right? So, I think the EID definitely will provide less friction having to have those things. But for the enablement of the UPI, as I said, the financial sector and the regulators, I think, have done a good job in providing at least a framework that could allow some of that friction to reduce, right? Because at the end of the day, what it does is you simplify due diligence allows you to transact up to a certain volume, so meaning that, and Ian can tell you, with a simplified due diligence, Ian might let you spend $200 a week. But if I have to do larger transactions, Ian might ask you for more proof or more validation, and I think that's a process that could be refined to kind of help with the adoption, particularly for UPI and TT. So I think we do have at least a good starting point while the EID is, permeating.
If I can just say, continuing from what John said, yes, we may not have the best in terms of the EID, but we do have the ability to accept one form of payment. So it's up now to the fintechs and to reduce the burden, the friction associated with that. Hopefully with one form of ID, if someone is signing up on the beach or at home or in the taxi or wherever, they have that form of ID on them. So they can simply just complete the process in the shortest time possible.
Right. So I'm hearing this, I'm hearing the whole onboarding identity issues and stuff. And as someone who's originally from the UK, but been here for a while now, opening bank accounts is difficult. Up to recently, about a year ago, I tried to open up a business account. I did successfully. Even the first step was, I had to make an appointment, and they said, look, we give you an appointment, which was like 60 days away. So I had to wait 60 days to get an appointment. I went in there and, as John pointed out, soon as I gave him my British passport, I had to now bring in a whole set of other documentation. And it was just taking long. So I was looking at alternatives, right? So I was looking at, okay, look, can I use other technologies? Can I use international banking to solve some of my issues? And I explored, and there were some options. Are you seeing the same thing? Is there this concept of OTT banking coming along, similar to what, let's say, Skype would have done, a few decades ago, seeing an opportunity? And if the local retail bankers, regulators, or players in the local market do not act enough, then just from pure convenience, the OTT banking may become more and more convenient for the locals, and they start drifting towards there, and then we end up with another set of problems. Are you seeing any sort of trend in that direction?
Definitely. I think for fintechs and to position themselves in the market, they have to look at what is happening abroad and also customize that to the local market. Because if you were to introduce a system similar to a mobile banking app, or let's say what the banks and they offer, then you're not offering much differentiation to the man in the street. Okay, so fintechs over time, you would find that their product would more resemble what you see or what you can access abroad. Okay, because that's where the digital mindset and that of the young people are heading. I mean, I will tell you that we have had several persons signing up onto Paywise. As part of the requirement, you have to submit proof of address. Okay? And some persons have actually submitted a bank statement from a foreign bank, one of these foreign online mobile banks. Okay? Of course, we could not have accepted it, but it shows you that, like you mentioned, if it is that they cannot find their needs or satisfy their needs from the local services offered, they will go abroad. And technology is allowing that to happen seamlessly. Okay, so fintechs have to be very sensitive to that and very sensitive to what the market wants, particularly the younger market, which is the market of tomorrow, and position themselves to provide adequate services to prevent that market from going abroad.
Same question to Shiva. So you seeing any trends in alternative banking, and alternative banking not just to alternative to Trinidad's retail banks, but even alternative to Trinidad's fintech?
So people gonna gravitate to whichever provider is providing them with the service that they need. And Ian as a fintech would know this, and you now have to tailor your services to meet their needs. So if it is that there are providers, international, that can provide something that the local providers can't provide, there's just going to gravitate to that. So it just speaks to local fintechs being able to respond to what the market is demanding. It's good that the fintechs are now present and active within Trinidad and Tobago. We have moved away somewhat from we've created a space aside from the legacy financial sector players that is now the fintechs that they could flourish and provide new services. Big problem to the fintechs is going to be uptake and usage. How do you intend to attract people to your platform? And how do you intend to keep them spending on your platform? Because that's how you're going to generate fees, probably, most likely. So how do you make this thing interesting? And that brings up the concept of ancillary services, value-add services, which is really the key differentiator to fintechs from each other. A digital wallet is a digital wallet is a digital wallet. But what is the service that you get on top of Ian's service that you don't get on top of John Doe's service? That is what it comes down to. How do you make this thing attractive to persons to get them to sign up and to get them to continue to use it? The threats from away, they will always be there. You now have to differentiate your product from what else is in the market.
All right. So, John, same question to you. Is that something that's on your horizon? Are you seeing any trends? You guys are looking into policies or having discussions on the possible threat of OTT banking?
I can tell you quite confidently, there's no CEO of any Caribbean bank that is losing sleep on Revolut coming into the Caribbean, for example, right? I think they understand the market, they understand their customers. But what I can say, as you're speaking about fintech, and I think is not about the banks coming in, but it's about fintech, and more importantly, I think it's the progression of crypto. So I would tell you, cryptocurrency, I think, has seen a lot more interest, particularly with the unbanked and the underbanked within the Caribbean. Locally, I have seen so many entities popping up who are basically providing what I would call online trading services, where you come and you bring cash from me and I will trade on the crypto markets for you. Because what you see going around globally is, and we've seen it all over, right? There's an inherent trust in financial institutions. More importantly, there's an inherent trust. People are starting to get a lot more, I would say, wise about their money and obviously in terms of, what the value of that is. And they're seeing all of these headlines, particularly with Trump taking over, and a lot of the discussions about crypto and the fact that the rise of crypto and the value and the ability to, I would just put it this way, to make a lot of value in an extremely short space of time. That attractiveness is now what is drawing a lot of people. So I think that is now causing banks a lot more problems, because what you find happening is that in order to purchase the digital assets, you have to use either your credit card or some other form of credential to do that. So I think earlier as last year, you could have probably purchased crypto from a lot of the banks. I think now, if not all, or probably one or two, still allow you to do that, right? Because it's now becoming, that sort of behavior is now becoming more and more pervasive. So I think the shift towards digital assets or alternative fiat is what I think is a little more concerning. And I think on the fintech side, that is probably going to be the sort of business model you're going to find a lot of people sort of pursuing, where say for Ian, right? Ian is an electronic money issuer, right? But Ian's Paywise dollar is tied to a fiscal capital allocation, a one-to-one that's in Ian's bank account, right? Ian can report to the regulator that I have $100,000 in customer deposits and I don't have any money to back that, right? That will not go well, right? And again, the digital asset guys, they don't have that problem, right? Because it's all, it's all fungible at the end of the day, right? But I do think that there is this this interest in terms of the mass public, in terms of what I would call financial freedom. Rather than me putting my money in the bank and relying on the bank to move that money into spreads and to give me interest, where I can have a say in where I put that money, and I could put that money into different things. That I think is something that is causing a lot of concerns, not just for financial institutions, but for regulators sort of going forward. And again, it all stems from financial education and educating the public in terms of what is safe and what is unsafe. Because, people using these terms interchangeably, and it could paint the whole industry with a broad brush, right?
Right. So thanks for that. So leading on from that, from the last part of what you just mentioned, question for Ian and Shiva initially is, how safe is it, right? So from a cybersecurity that we addressed yesterday, new technology, you were talking about instant payments, so from a mobile phone. So how safe is it? How can we trust it?
When you are in the business of money, you're in the business of trust, period. Because for people to park their money with you, they must trust you. And once you understand that, then you understand that your entire system, your entire DNA, whatever you do, must have that trust umbrella over it. So many fintechs have to look at the infrastructure for one thing. We certainly do. We employ third-party security services to review our system, to advise us how to tighten that. In addition to that, introducing security on the part of the customer. Because many times when sometimes breaches occur, it's because of some weak point where the customer, in terms of the strength of their password, or the openness in which they conduct their affairs. So part of that has to deal with education to ensure that they know what are the best practices, and also to employ within the application various options that can encourage users to utilize the strongest possible means of authentication for transactions. So from our perspective, security goes hand in hand with what we offer. Trust in terms of the integrity of the information that we hold, the privacy of the information, that is the data that we hold, and also the manner in which transactions are conducted.
Right.
Yeah, so how safe is it is a very broad question. So you give me a blank template there to start off on. So let me start. And we could start from where John left off with the crypto aspect. So we have a lot of interest in crypto over the years has been towards capital gain, not so much towards spending. In Trinidad and Tobago, I think it's a little bit different in that we do have that interest for capital gains, but we still have an interest in remittances. So for example, it is being used in the migrant community to send back value to Venezuela and so on. So in migrant communities, you find the use of crypto for that purpose. You see people selling USDT, different types of crypto to send back. We have scams. We have seen scams operating where people put forward, if you give me your crypto, we're gonna give you a fantastic return, an impossible return, and people have gotten caught with these scams. And we've seen that. We've seen evidence of that. We've worked on a project. We've used a particular tool to look at wallets that have a particular value, and we were able to tie the identity of that entity to another identity, prove a link between those two entities. So how safe is it? Scams are prevalent within that area. A lot of online romance scams, extortion scams, and something I came across personally just last week, where you have something called financial sextortion taking place. The internet is borderless, and we need to be aware of that. When you have scams taking place, it doesn't matter where you live. And I could tell you, financial sextortion, there are victims in Trinidad and Tobago. And it is something where it's basically an online blackmail scheme. Somebody pretending to be someone else. A catfish takes place. They befriend like a teen. They get a teen to post compromising photos of themselves. And then they use those same photos against the teenager. And there are dire consequences to this. Down to suicide, teen suicide. And I know of a case of this most recently in Trinidad and Tobago. So we need to be, and in this particular case, the payment mechanism is not so much crypto, but it is something that we may think is benign. It is something as simple as digital gift cards. So in as much as we are putting up fences and barriers for what we think are the bad things like crypto and virtual assets and digital currencies, something that we take for granted in digital gift cards could be used to pay scammers on international scams. And so we need to look at safety, security. The most vulnerable within our society, which are the young and the elderly, they seem to be targets of particular types of scams that that are being perpetrated by international cybercrime gangs, criminal entities. You look it up on the internet, you'll see some of these financial sextortion actors, who they are. There are cases going on in North Dakota right now that are targeting some of these entities. I don't want to call any names, but you can look it up and you can see some of these things. So I bring this up in the context of, as we're talking about digital innovation, transaction finance, digital finance services, there's a part of this that we need to pay attention to with respect to cybercrime, and it's not where we think it is. It's not as simple as, hey, let's blame it on crypto. Something as simple as digital gift cards could be leaking monies from our society to somewhere else in the world. So we need to look at that, and yeah.
John, we've heard the risks on that. Now, is there like a education plan or initiative from yourselves, or you're still watching to see how this plays out?
No, we started to earlier this year roll out a national public education campaign, to be quite honest. And everything that Shiva was saying, for example, just give like a very, and I guess this is the reason why you have the formal financial sector and regulations to protect the consumer, right? And although the consumer doesn't feel the protection, that's what it's designed there for, right? So like, I lost $20 just walking from my car to my office this morning. I don't know where it went. Probably fell out my pocket, right? But if I try to take $20 out of the links machine and it failed or whatever, probably in an hour time it'll show back up in my account, right? But those are the things that you don't get featured or you don't get highlighted by the institutions, right? Meaning that once your money is in a formal financial institution, it is guaranteed, right? It is your money. There are a lot of systems and processes and institutions to help protect and make sure that your money is safe, right? So we have been pushing out a national public education campaign, primarily pushing the whole concept about understanding, one, the benefits of doing cashless transactions. I can't tell you the amount of negative feedback we have received so far, but we continue to refine and we realize that there is a huge mistrust, right? And at the same time, I think it's about continuing to have those conversations. More importantly, talk about the efficiency. Like one of the main things was, Trinidad and Tobago is kind of well ahead the Caribbean. The fact that people find it takes so long when you're using a card, but I don't know if you realize when you tap and pay, it's actually a lot quicker than doing cash. You pull up by a drive-through, you have to give the cashier cash, you have to go in, get change, give it to you. You tap, you pay, you move on. It has almost become sort of ubiquitous, right? But these are things that we have to continue to promote and make awareness on. So I think it's a long journey ahead. But I think the bigger, action point for us is, how do we incorporate the EONs and other providers to be those sort of ambassadors, help boost what they are doing as use cases to the public, get them more involved, get them more in line, particularly with those more vulnerable groups. Because one of the main things we got out of the survey was, believe it or not, the biggest vulnerable groups in terms of the ones who are most apprehensive are obviously the elderly, the youth. We had MSMEs, and it wasn't because they didn't want to participate, but because they were also unable to participate for one form or another. So it's one thing to communicate, but it's also to communicate, identify the barriers, and then put actions in place to kind of help reduce those barriers, because once you get people in the system, the reality is you will start to see that sort of difference in behaviors and so forth, right? So it's a long road ahead, but it's Trinidad, we are interested in society, to say the least.
I'm going to just add to that. What we have seen in some markets is that the players in the market and the regulatory framework have been put there to facilitate the adoption of digital payments, but the population may not have gravitated to it until there was an inflection point. Something that happened within society that all of a sudden made the fintech option, the go-to solution for that issue. In Trinidad, maybe the crime situation, maybe that inflection point. I know in the past we've had COVID, and COVID saw the rise in digital transactions. But it has not necessarily gone over the top to become widespread as one may like it to be. Or maybe another potential inflection point may be the devaluation of the dollar.
Right. Thanks for that. Deb, do we have any questions online? I know we're coming towards the end, so just on this.
Comment from Stacey after that. Right. So there was a comment from Stacey Rampasad. Maybe mentorship by connecting SMEs and the unbanked with fintech mentors and industry experts. Free webinars, how to fintech for dummies, can help to guide the digital revolution evolution. There are many who are still scared because of the fear of the unknown that technology encapsulates.
Yeah, so that would get handled with the ongoing education. I guess you have your small set of early adopters, and then the herd comes in, and then you still got the laggers at the end. So that's gonna.
Well, if I could just interject there. So John's TTIFC did a financial inclusion study, and one of the statistics I recall vividly is 24% of the respondents. So I don't know if they projected it onto the population, but there was a fair or there was a legitimate concern around security and privacy, which would prevent people from uptaking in online transactions. So now that we have that document and we have that financial inclusion study. I mean, I remember attending some of these type of meetings maybe 10 years ago, and we didn't know what is the credit card usage rate, and we were relying on something that we hear from, but don't call my name because I didn't say that. So we have definite statistics now. We have a good base that we could start from and address specific deficiencies that have been found within that study. So I would certainly hope that John, now that you guys have this study, there's certain measures that you all are going to put in place to foster a more inviting environment for persons within online transactions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that started already, Shiva, right? So that's what we're talking about with the strategy and the roadmap. And, UPI is one such of those initiatives, right? Because one of the main objectives coming out of that study was the fact that a lot of people were saying that they're just unable to participate in the current payment infrastructure, and they needed a more accessible, low cost, So UPI was like one of those such initiatives, right? So while we're waiting to get I would say, a formal national financial strategy approved, the idea is we're taking bits and pieces of those initiatives, what we can do based on the current environment and start to action that, right? To your point, Shiva, been in similar conversations. I've been in government way too long. We sit down in meetings, have strategies, talk about nice to haves, and nothing really ever gets done, right? And that has always been the tale.
Right. Just before I take a question from you, Albert, just want to say to the audiences that are, or the audience that is remote online, if you got any questions, feel free to put them in chat and Dave will read them out. We are getting to the end of the session, so we've got about 15, 20 minutes for any questions and answers or anything else that you may want to ask the guys. Albert?
Thank you, Albert Daniels, St. Lucia. On the 23rd of January, there was an executive order signed in the United States, essentially putting a ban on central bank digital currencies in the United States. I don't know. Well, I am aware that the Central Bank of Trinidad has maybe been talking a little bit about the currency. I don't know if they have one deployed, but I think in Shiva's bio, I heard something about Dcash, which is central bank currency in the Eastern Caribbean region. So I just wanted to ask, I don't know, maybe John or Shiva or Ian can just speak about the impacts, if any, of that kind of executive order, which perhaps may have been done for several reasons, one of which is looking at a particular situation with regard to cash-backed digital currencies. But what do we expect? Any kind of impact at all from that kind of order that has been signed on our region?
Yeah, so there's a domestic order in the US, and CBDC in the US was never going to take off. Too many privacy concerns, surveillance concerns were coming to the fore in preliminary discussions within the US. So I never looked towards the US to be a proponent for CBDC, although there is still research taking place within the US with respect to CBDC. So that will apply to there. In the Caribbean, we have Jamaica and Bahamas still have operational CBDCs, and it's a retail CBDC, which means that I have my phone. So similar to what John described with the doubles vendor, I have my phone, I'm able to transact with another entity that has an account and send value to them. So the ECCB had an operational CBDC within the Eastern Caribbean, St. Lucia included. And again, I'll go back to the issue of uptake and usage. You're going to have ways to stimulate uptake and usage within any product that you put out. You can't just say, I build it, they will come. It doesn't work like that anymore. Well, it doesn't work like that. Some people may sign up as well and they may not utilize it. So globally, CBDC in Europe and in the UK, they are seen as some of the global leaders in what they are putting forward with the digital euro and digital pound. still being researched, nothing concrete as yet. Some of the Nordic countries as well. Sweden, I think, yeah. Canada has dropped their interest with respect to doing an implementation of CBDC. I think Trinidad and Tobago, we've heard John could back me up on this. CBDC is a solution looking for a problem. That has been what has been stated in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to retail CBDC. Now, wholesale CBDC is something else where you have interbank transfers, basically, or central bank to bank transfers. So on the retail side, Trinidad has gone a different route. Trinidad has gone the route of signing an MOU for UPI, which is instant payment or fast payment, whichever term makes more sense. And yeah, so it's retail payment system innovation nonetheless. It's good that we're doing that. There are still some, as John described, it's going to be a technical pilot, basically, but there are still issues that need to be sorted out, governance issues, stakeholder engagement. It was good to hear that you guys had some stakeholder engagement already back in December. I'd say the commercial product. So you're doing a technical pilot is good. What does the commercial product look like? Because that's where it gets down to the dollars and cents question. So that needs to be sorted out as well. So I would say there's still a lot of work to be done. But it would be good to see a technical pilot take place. And it can take place without digital identity. If you take your onboarded already clients and work with already onboarded clients, and you just have the interoperable piece in the middle. So yeah. So yes, long-winded way to say, no, don't worry, CBDC in the US was never going to take off.
Just to add to what Shiva was saying, it basically ties into America's new agenda where, supporting private sector solutions versus government-led solutions, which CBDC is, from a large perspective, is meant to be led by the government, So again, in most scenarios, you would find that obviously if the state is driving something, and this also comes, to your point, Shiva, we're talking about the fast payment systems, right? Because the commercial model is really where the success would lies, right? Because one would say, should the state be running a payment system? Is that going to be more efficient? Or should a private sector operator, should it be supported by the state, enabled, facilitated, and then handed over to the private sector to really make it scalable and successful, So for the gentleman who asked that question, that is simply what that meant, which I don't think it's a bad thing because, we have seen a lot of examples where the state trying to run certain industries just, quite frankly, isn't quick enough, to do it because of all of the bureaucracy and so forth.
I think from a fintech point of view, fintechs would more appreciate wholesale CBDC as opposed to retail CBDC. Wholesale, as Shiva indicated, is where banks, central banks within a region can use the wholesale CBDC to make settlements between the different territories. On the ground in each of the territory, you would have the fintechs and allowing their customers to, let's say, send money. Let's say from Trinidad to Jamaica to St. Lucia and back seamlessly, quickly, as if they were sending money to the neighbor next door. Okay, the settlement aspect of that would be handled by the central banks using the CBDC wholesale rail. I think fintechs, and they will very much appreciate that because that will lead to the uplift of more activity transactions on their system and bring the Caribbean closer together in terms of trade and payment, etc.
Okay, I think it's on, but low. It's on, but maybe just low. Just responding to your last question, except that we don't have a common currency within CARICOM, so that may work within the OECS. But
well, the central banks will actually take care of that because it's central bank to central bank. Central banks, they communicate with each other quite quickly. Many of them may have, let's say, agreements between them. So they will be able to easily and transparently handle that settlement aspect of the process. Shiva?
I think you had a follow-up.
Yeah, well, again, I would give way to you on this because I'm not, I'm sure I'm not as knowledgeable as you are at this, but I think the challenge that we still have is the fact that we don't trade in, so the Barbados dollar trading with a EC dollar and so on still requires a transaction through the US bank account. You correct me, right? So yes, they will settle, but we're still relying on the US banking system.
Okay, so the traditional way of, let's say, remitting or sending payments in US dollars, once it is in the US currency, it has to go through the US banking system. The CBDC would sidestep that. Central banks will talk directly to central banks within the region so that there isn't the need for that intermediary within the United States to conduct the transfer between parties. Okay.
So just to add to that, the G20 group has put out that they want to see a reduction in the frictions that permeate cross-border transaction flows. Timeliness, accessibility, cost. There was one more, I can't remember. Four basic areas. Towards this objective, there has been a lot of research by, for example, entities like the Bank of International Settlements to how can we do a bridged CBDC to settle transactions within ourselves and reduce and achieve better cross-border transaction, lessen the frictions, basically. There's also been, so not just with CBDC, they've also done work with instant payment or fast payment systems. So the same, well, not particularly UPI, but a system similar like UPI, which Trinidad is seeking to introduce, making a bridge between these type of systems and trying to get increased or reduced frictions in cross-border transaction flows. So again, these technologies are just technologies, but the goal is towards reduction of frictions for cross-border flows.
So just allow me to just finish by drawing attention to a project which we are supporting, which is Carib Coin, the use of Carib dollar for cross-border settlements as well. It's a complementary currency. You'll find more information on our website. I'm sorry that Dr. Schroeder is not on. He's one of the principals. But the idea is that it promotes the frictionless trade between the Caribbean countries for that very reason, because of the lack of a common currency. So it's a complementary currency called Carib Coin. And we have a webinar planned, I think it's either Q1 or Q2, that will share some more insights into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question for John. We've heard about the survey report that was done, I believe, last year. We made reference to it. So quick question for the audience. Is it a public document? Are you able to share that? How can those that are interested get hold of that document? And
we have the report on our website, TTIFC.co.tt. We developed a simple version of it that anybody could download and get it. What we are doing right now is we are working with a firm to create, because to Shiva's point, it was the first national survey. We surveyed, we had 99% confidence interval across both Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the data. It's very interesting because, we wanted to get at least 1,200 people to participate in the survey. We got 2,000. So clearly this was something on the top of mind for a lot of people. So we actually have that raw data right now. What we're doing right now is building again, the advancements of AI, developing a language model so that we can have this data so people can ask the questions in terms of, how many people in Shogunas, for example, have access to a bank account, or to Shiva's point, what percentage of credit cards were used to buy retail, and all these different things. So right now we're working on refining that into a use case that people are accustomed doing right now, using a simplified chat interface. So the report is available online, but we're making available the public data set via a large language model, hopefully within the next 2 months or so.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing that. But just a quick question. What were the main takeaways or you think that came out of that survey that you've seen? Just the top one or two.
The three major platform issues that we saw coming out of it was one, the financial exclusion rate in the country grew from 2017 from 18% to 24%. Two, nearly 80% of all small businesses within Trinidad and Tobago are unable to open a business bank account and therefore unable to offer any form of digital payment acceptance. And three, nearly 60% of the population were unaware of how to use these digital financial services. While they had a number of different indicators, those three were the most, I would say, provocative indicators that we kind of realized that, we needed to kind of look at that top level and kind of work downwards. Because everything I just mentioned to you there, you could almost tie it back to a lot of the problems that we've been discussing on this panel for the last hour, yeah? In terms of the apprehension to be in the system, not being able to access the system, trade, e-commerce, so everything that we do to try and enable those things, unless we address the root causes of those three issues, that's going to be a lot of effort with no real activity.
Right. Thanks for that. So, it seems like that the data is backing up what our perception was, and then, recognizing the actual issue is normally 80% of the solution. So that's good to hear. We are getting towards the end of our session, but before we totally finish off, just want to ask the panelists if they've got any last comments, or if you said, look, over the next 2 or 3 years, what's one of the biggest things that you'd like to either see happening or you think is going to happen? Starting with Ian.
Greater adoption across the board in terms of fintech services, and also higher level of interoperability between fintechs, and also greater access to the payment requirements as per the government, public sector, and also credit unions. So once there's an opening of the market in many respects, from the point of payments and from the point of customer adoption, and also interoperability with existing networks and among the fintechs themselves, I think that will go a long way in terms of achieving a higher digital penetration.
Yeah, that's good. Definitely attention required on the credit union sector. It's good to see some progress being made with that. I should mention in the ECCB Dcash project, we did have credit unions participate and issue to their customers as well. So we wanted that inclusive approach. Typically, as John mentioned, you don't want government overreach. But I think in that project, it was necessary to stimulate the innovation within the territory. So similarly, with something like what we are doing with EMI, trying to stimulate industry away from the legacy providers, which is, of course, a competition, but definitely stimulate innovation. I'd like to see continuation of that. So continuation of that stimulating environment for alternative providers to thrive.
Thank you. And John, what should we look out for? What do you think is going to be the big items in fintech over the next 12 to 24 months?
I would like to phrase it as an outcome based on where I believe strongly, based on the trajectory and the effort and resources being put into place. Within the 12 months, somebody should be able to go on TikTok and do a day in the life in Trinidad and Tobago without cash. That is, I think, something that, at least within the 12 months, I have put that as a target for myself. If before I leave here, I must be able to get up one morning and use my phone exclusively for one day without having my wallet. I think that would be the biggest impact at the man on the street level. And I think that's what we should be aiming for. And hopefully that phone should have a Paywise app, Ian.
Most definitely.
Using UPI.
And if you do that test, make sure one of the activities in that 24-hour period of cashless life is that they have to buy some doubles.
Of course, yeah, that's the first starting point.
That's the acid test. You've succeeded when you can get some doubles without making a cash payment.
And you won't believe it. And that's how it starts, right? Because people start to see that and how you did that. Because nobody wants the hassle. Everybody wants convenience, but it all starts by that first adopters and getting that anxiety. And, is by enabling the most vulnerable in societies where we will see that sort of behavior, really push through, right? So that's why I have great hope on this, because at least on the financial sector end, it's more government enabled versus government led. And really the private sector is the one that has to come in and push it through, which is how it should be in any successful implementation. Government enables the private sector comes in and crowds in the solutions, and that's how you get the sort of buy-in. I've never seen it work any other way.
Right, thanks for that, John. We have come to the end of the session, so I just want to thank the panelists for taking their time and also for contributing to this this panel and discussion and sharing with us some valuable information. I do think we're on the right trajectory. We do have obstacles. There is a lot of frustration. I see it as well from, let's say, the traditional way of doing things. But we do also see momentum coming up, and hopefully we will get that inflection point where things will start to take off and we see rapid progress. But when that time comes, it will be based on all the stuff that's happening now. So everyone, thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to hand back over. Oh, sorry. So we're now going to take a 5-minute break. So for those that want to grab a coffee or a refreshment, then now's the time to do so. And we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
She is the lead on an AI-driven platform for climate resilience for small island developing states, a project which won her the 2024 AI Innovation Grand Challenge Award at the COP29. Dr. Addison is the recipient of many awards and champions diversity and data literacy as the Women in Data Science Trinidad and Tobago Ambassador. As the leader of an AI in climate research cluster within the TT Lab Data Science Group, Dr. Addison drives innovation at the intersection of AI, data science, and sustainability. Her work focuses on developing data-driven solutions for climate resilience and disaster risk prediction, establishing her as a leader in applying AI for sustainable development. Join me in welcoming Dr. Letetia Addison. Dr. Addison, turning over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today on this very pertinent topic. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm hoping that it will be a very insightful session, more of a conversation, so I don't want to feel like a presentation, but really and truly at the junction that we are now in terms of climate change and climate resilience, it's really important for us to think about how disaster risk can be improved, and mitigation, prevention, and all of these things. How can we really use the tools that we have at our disposal currently to be able to really have more sustainable solutions? So I'll jump right into my slides, and really looking forward to your questions at the end of the session. So I know I have a little bit of a loaded introductory slide in terms of the outline. But what we really want to do is start from thinking about the disaster management cycle itself, the different facets of that cycle in terms of prediction, prevention, emergency response, recovery, and then really take from those insights, both globally and regionally, the opportunities and challenges that we have to navigate the current landscape. And in that way, I'm also going to give you some insight into some of the work that we have been doing in collaboration with the UNFCCC. And I'm very happy to have Prof. Hussein here as well, because he's also part of that team. And hopefully we can have some future directions evolving from this conversation. So where do we really start with disaster resilience? I mean, really and truly, what does it mean? And in that sense, we think about it as the capacity for us to look at how systems can work in communities to help them recover from disasters. So globally, the significance, the UN's Disaster Risk Reduction Center has said that natural disasters actually impact 150 million people annually. And of course, in the Caribbean, we know this is the case for us more than often than we would like. So the urgency now, especially with small island developing states and least developed countries, is to think about these types of solutions, because by the year 2030, as you could see the projection that we have, these events are actually expected or projected to reach more than 500 per year. So that's very alarming. Now, how could we think about disaster communication, preparedness, response, early warning systems, multi-hazard systems, and emergency systems? How could these all coincide and connect with each other to really be able to help us today? And I would really like to say also to enhance some of the traditional systems that we have. So it feels like a lecture slide, but this really is the snapshot and the meat of the matter, which really is thinking about the management cycle. And these are the facets that we really want to think about in different ways. And what I like to do is look into the global context and the regional context and see where the similarities and the gaps are. Because at this point, we want to be able to, as a region, be able to move forward with solutions, especially in the digital age, to be able to meet some of these different facets and to see how well we are doing currently and where we need to improve and where we need to collaborate more. So, of course, prediction in itself, using the data to anticipate the disasters, prevention, really thinking about mitigating those risks through the infrastructure and the policies, because the policy part of it is going to be extremely important when we start to talk about AI. And of course, emergency response in terms of coordinating the actions during the crises. And then we know recovery is also a very, very huge part of this, which is rebuilding after the disasters. I'm not too sure if you can see some of those small aspects here, but this is really digital technologies for climate action. And what you really think about is what are the data types, and then what are the technologies that sort of, these data types will funnel into to be able to create these systems and the infrastructure that we need. So we think about, like, we have the internet, we have our mobile devices, there's remote sensing, satellite imagery databases, geographic information systems at one level. Then we have things like social media and apps, and how can we actually go forward a step further, another stage now to actually use those technologies and kind of branch out into kind of a wider funnel, I like to say. And then when you think about all of those aspects and think about the stage 3, where I think that's the most critical stage that we're actually looking at currently, where we have the artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT devices, Internet of Things, smart systems, smart communities, even blockchain. All of these systems now, how do we actually get them to interact with each other in a way that's going to be meaningful for disaster resilience? So these digital technologies are really important in that perspective. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk through some of these examples and kind of see where they are. If you can see the graph from your end and really think about how technology could speed up and support disaster response. The IoT devices, as you could see, are actually on quite an incline since 2007 in terms of the use. And what we really have to think about is some examples of what we really need in these different systems. We really want to think about, and when I come to the end of the talk, I'll really tell you all about a platform that really is encompassing these aspects, which is thinking about the predictive analytics, the real-time monitoring that we would need, and the types of tools, the rapid response in terms of the mobile apps, crisis alerts, and the damage assessment and rescue. So you would see in these aspects, of course, we're thinking about the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the climate and weather forecasting, which we would have done traditionally, and then how we could integrate that into the real-time monitoring with the devices, the networks, satellite imaging, remote sensing, etc. So let's just start thinking about disaster prediction on the whole. Tech for early warning systems. And of course, early warning systems are very crucial right now. The UN Disaster Risk Reduction Center would like by 2027 for most countries to develop some sort of technology and, of course, early warning mechanisms, right? So we think about how we want to revolutionize that. And we have to start, and I'm really a statistician by training. So data in itself is a very crucial aspect here. While we can have the machines and the algorithms and these things to do the predictions, we need to train these on real data most of the time to be able to make AI models that could perform really well. So in that sense, we have to think about, in these types of tech systems, what do we need? And a really nice example is that in Taiwan, they actually are using AI now to predict typhoon paths. So they have real data from previous typhoons, they have historical data, and they're actually building these models to see the projections of these paths. And of course, this is what's going to really drive us from the traditional systems of the early warning systems of just tracking a hurricane that probably came off the coast of Africa from how many ever weeks, and doing it in more of a real-time sense. So what we want to keep our eye on is how much faster can we integrate these systems to be able to give us more real-time monitoring, right? So the early warning systems, we want to be able to use AI to really give us more information and more projections than we would have had before. I don't know if anybody has been familiar with Google's Flood Hub, which I think has been a really recent addition to some of their technology. But now with Google, you can actually, from various countries, go into this flood-based database. They have a lot of satellite data. They have mapping for various countries. Some of it is a little bit sparse for the Caribbean, and we know why, because of our data, our lack of in certain cases. But you'll be able to actually see the path or the projected path for the floods before they occur, right? And then you can have your mobile devices integrated into that to give you the real-time context and the monitoring of that. And you could actually interact with these devices as well. So you could actually have AI now helping you to make flood forecasting in itself much more beneficial or really more efficient at a global scale. Even AI in earthquake monitoring. If we think about earthquakes, in fact, Japan themselves have they would have had tsunamis and earthquakes and typhoons over time. What they would have done is work with the UN to develop a resilience partnership where they use AI algorithms to identify pre-quake signals using seismic sensors. And that information now they keep training on now to build even more integrated systems to really give them those real-time monitoring and of course early warning systems, of course, to be able to help them understand minutes or even seconds before an earthquake hits, because it's a matter of seconds would probably save someone's life. Now, this was actually something that I only recently noted this week. And it was so insightful that in St. Kitts and Nevis, as drought sets in, of course, farmers themselves have to think about their crops. So they actually have been working with some of the UN climate tech centers to be able to do drought risk mapping. And of course, now they could receive critical weather forecasts and groundwater predictions via WhatsApp, which is really, really interesting on both droughts and hurricanes. And of course, these types of innovative tools will help them to really do smarter planning with respect to, actually protecting their crops. So you can kind of see the perspective of the story we're building here on how these tools integrated into the real life aspects. When meteorologists think about AI to forecast hurricane, there was this Hurricane Milton, and also when we had Hurricane Beryl before it reached the path of the US, they used pattern recognition. So the AI itself was able to actually recognize patterns in the atmospheric data and do predictive modeling of the hurricane paths days in advance. But we want to kind of make that not only days in advance, we want to kind of go by probably even hours in advance and kind of do more updating of those systems. So you kind of get the sense now that what we have works, but it could be actually improved. And in fact, in terms of Texas, it actually predicted the path accurately for the path of Beryl to Texas. So it actually outperformed the traditional models. And that's really game-changing technology that they use there in terms of things called GraphCast and other types of AI modeling to be able to do hurricane forecasting. So that's kind of like a context of the disaster prediction and the kinds of things that we want to think about, hopefully, to really ramp up the real-time monitoring and complement the traditional systems. What about disaster prevention? So what does that look like? Really building more resilient infrastructure using these tools. So we want to think about looking at mitigating the risks and implementing the measures. And I'm just going to really quickly just list, I'm not going to go through each one, but I'm just kind of going to target some of these that I think some of us actually would probably be using in parts of our region already, like drones for risk assessment. I know farmers would be involved in some of that work. I know the Cropper Foundation and also TT Lab had been involved in looking at drones in terms of agriculture as well. Smart infrastructure and GIS mapping, early warning systems, digital twins for simulations, which is actually a much more larger emerging field now in terms of what it can do for the region when looking at comparisons to scenarios or scenario analysis. So in that sense, I'll give you a couple of examples of some of these. So in terms of the digital transformation for the Caribbean, Jamaica in itself is actually looking at using the GIS information to map flood-prone areas in terms of planning infrastructure projects for flood risk. And this approach has actually significantly reduced some of the impacts of flooding in their communities. Then we also have digital twins for disaster simulation. And a digital twin is really, as it sounds, it's really a replica of the original physical environment. Now, of course, this type of infrastructure would take a lot of resources and computing power. But what it does for you, especially like in Singapore, they have actually started to use digital twins or that virtual environment to actually simulate disasters. And in that sense, you can actually look at if floods would cause infrastructure to collapse, looking at more proactive interventions, etc. Even in Singapore's their redevelopment authority, they actually use it to design or redesign the drainage systems to actually help to mitigate the flood risks. So you could see that a lot of these would help you in different facets of looking at preemptive or proactive solutions rather than always being reactive. And that's kind of the direction we want to head in when we're using these AI-based tools to really complement what we are doing. Even when you think about in New Zealand, they have used IoT devices. These are these smart sensors. And what they are looking at doing is using that for stormwater infrastructure monitoring. So a startup called Heed in New Zealand has actually been using that to transfer information into these data lakes, cloud services, third-party providers, and APIs to really think about networking the historical and the current data and making these automated alerts for timely intervention. And I think the automated alerts really kind of probably give us more of a step up from the traditional systems where we get these periodic sort of updates. So that's where that comes into more the latest technologies of looking at using that to help with disaster prevention beforehand. And I think for us, even in parts of Port of Spain, you probably would agree that we should probably rethink the drainage in certain sections, because sometimes it's not just the rainfall, sometimes it's the drainage, deforestation, and all these factors. So we can't just blame the climate change. I mean, we have to also blame ourselves and also think of other mechanisms to improve our systems. So we have thought about so far the prevention, the prediction, the prevention. But then what happens when we actually have the disaster? Because we can't actually, in all cases, prevent it from happening. So what are we going to do in that sense? We want to enhance the coordination and the communication. So thinking about it, we could actually enhance the response efforts by improving that communication, coordination, and the resource allocation. And a lot of this is happening in different countries on different scales. Use of the mobile apps for alerts and coordination, social media and crowdsourced data. I mean, a lot of you would probably be familiar with Facebook. A lot of people say marked safe when some event happens. Or even, interestingly enough, I think last year, I remember I was sitting down, the earthquake was happening, and Google was telling me the earthquake was happening on my phone, which was something that was quite new to see, and given information on, actually evacuation procedures, etc. So some of these things actually come in more on stream as we go. Drones, of course, we mentioned before, and then AI chatbots for crisis management. And the AI chatbots are actually going more into a more agentic sort of approach as well, that I will speak about when I mention some of the work that we are looking at currently. But in terms of emergency response, let's think about wildfires, for instance. I mean, you all have seen in the States, whether it was deliberate or not, they have experienced some really severe wildfires that have really swept through California. And there is this Watch Duty crowdsourcing app that actually takes the real-time alerts during disasters, and from persons talking about where their families are located, sending pictures and these types of things of the snapshots of the areas that have wildfires, etc. People can actually track the fire and see where it's spreading in real time. So, of course, you can actually plan evacuation routes much better. And it has these interactive features like these maps to ensure that the community is always updated and informed. And that's really what we need, especially in a situation like that where, it could really cause a loss of life in a very short space of time. So we want to think about also harnessing the community aspect and getting trust from the community to be able to use these tools. And it's really kind of building on these integrated public platforms, which is also going to change our perspectives and maybe also our mindset. And a shift has to happen as well in terms of how we feel about using these types of tools. So for instance, in the States, they actually have an integrated public alert and warning system, which they use to send emergency alerts via multiple channels. So now you could use your mobile phone, radio, television, all these multidimensional communication channels. And of course, you could actually spread critical information to affected populations. In terms of course, in Trinidad, I know in 2023 that the ODPM, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, they, in collaboration with they're under the Ministry of National Security, they launched the Public Alert Notification System. I'm not too sure how operational it is right now, but that in itself is also a really impressive move towards having us really use these systems to actually communicate and to have more of a real-time aspect into what's happening on the ground with respect to public alerts. Robots, revolutionizing emergency response with even autonomous robots. And some of the takeaways you'll probably hear at the end of this is a lot of words with A, because I'm going to say that really autonomous solutions, agentic solutions, AI solutions, adaptive solutions are really the direction that we want to take these sort of systems in, especially when you think about how fast the arena is going with respect to these types of systems. So even with disaster response, AI for Good actually talks about how they use autonomous robots to drive some of the progression in terms of some of these SDGs as well, and looking at the responses in terms of various disasters. So that brings us to the next point, or the last point in the cycle of the different systems. So the disaster recovery, facilitating rehabilitation with technology. As in my mind, this is what we really want to do. So what types of tools or what kind of systems would play a part here? So we really want to think about, if we want to have digital systems, how can we use that for aid dissemination, relief dissemination, thinking about even allocation of funding for rebuilding, etc. Reconstruction, looking at remote sensing, blockchain for transparent aid distribution. These are just a few examples of how that can look. And this is one example of even with the tsunami. Japan had a couple of tsunamis. I know we had a very large one in 2004 and some years prior. And they have used remote sensing in itself to really think about more real-time responses in terms of improving the disaster predictions and response efficiency through web technology integration. So the first mapping there you could see is just what happened in terms of the actual part of Japan that, you would have this tsunami heading towards. And then the next one is just giving you the maps or the routings of different areas where various resources would be needed, what can happen if it impacts these specific areas, etc. So it brings me to before concluding, really try to think about in terms of, these are some real headlines, right, on the internet. But there's an urgent call for digital transformation to foster resilience for Caribbean SIDS in particular. We are not unique. I mean, there are other small island developing states, there are least developed countries, but it's really thinking about what else can we be doing currently to actually drive this sort of technology into our current systems. So this, as our chair mentioned in the beginning, I was part of a team, a successful team involving Prof. Hussain and some really talented graduate students at the UE, where we were able to secure the first place in an innovation challenge at COP29. So we were actually looking at how do we think about these technologies in a way that we can integrate them into traditional systems, looking at having it be real-time monitoring, thinking about even using large language models, actually integrating that into education, say with flood risk education, you can have a large language model that you could interact with. But the difference is not just the model that we use online, like ChatGPT, that's just more deterministic and traditional, you get pulls information from the net. We want this to go further. We want it to be more real time. In that case, it has to become more autonomous. It has to learn from the data that it's getting from satellite imagery, from IoT, from social media, crowdsourcing, and all of these things. And in terms of that, this kind of early warning system could work with the traditional systems to ramp up the approach and, of course, be a more scalable solution. And that's why I said it has to be adaptive, autonomous, and agent-based. So this is just a kind of a snapshot of the platform in terms of what we are looking at currently. And we're actually working with agencies, not only locally, but also regionally and internationally as well, to really drive more of an AI-driven analytics platform, where it actually uses current systems and actually see how we can integrate more of that into scenario analysis and have different players in society use it, not only for the email notifications about maybe to farmers to say a flood is going to occur within the next hour, even the disaster risk professionals, so they could actually think about the allocations that may be needed if this flood hits and if it devastates this community. So some of the opportunities and challenges, I won't really read out all of them, but I would probably give the perspective of saying that these are huge opportunities for us to think about collaborating. And I think that we can't work in silos. A lot of persons, a lot of agencies are doing similar work. So it's really for us to think about how we can make these digital solutions more readily available, make them more open source. Right now, we actually part of an Early Warnings for All AI subgroup of the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Center, where we actually hearing about other solutions from across the world and thinking about how there could be an AI application hub to have more open source solutions. So that is kind of what we want to do, not only public and private partnerships as well, and more community-based solutions. And of course, the opportunities also have challenges, because at the end of the day, digital infrastructure costs money. It's very it's a lot of resources. And of course, we don't want to divide people anymore in terms of their own literacy. Some people are scared of the technology, may not be able to use, may not want to use it. So we have to think about all of these things in addition to the limited infrastructure, connectivity, privacy and data concerns, etc. If we want to use telecommunications data, there will be privacy issues there as well for people's location. So really, I know it's a very loaded talk, but it really gives a perspective now of where we are, what's available, what others are doing, and how could we come together and really think about taking these technologies to the next level, having them complement our solutions that we have locally in Trinidad, and of course, really investing more in this type of technology and really doing more testing. And I think that's really the value here, is to really have it work for us. I mean, collaborating regionally is going to be really a key part of this, and not forgetting that we also need to think about the policy implementations for such systems. I mean, we can't do these things in isolation. So we really want to encourage and empower the communities, and really, we don't want to leave people behind, but we have to also progress. So I think these are the aspects we want to think about overall in such an approach with digital tech. So I end up there, just letting you know, this is my team. We are working on the AI for SIDS project. If you want to see some of our part of our video proposal, you can. It's an 8-minute video proposal there, and we also have a climate.lab.tt website. We work on a number of other projects. We're also doing a machine learning for coastal resilience project as well, and we are looking for funding, collaborations, partners, etc., really to do something that's beneficial for not only Trinidad, but for the entire Caribbean as a whole. So I thank you very much. I hope I was not talking very fast for your time. And that's it. And I would welcome any questions. So I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Dr. Addison. I must say it's truly a very timely, insightful, and comprehensive presentation you gave us. showing the applicability of digital technologies in disaster management. We're opening the floor now for any questions, both from the live audience that is there and those online.
Yeah, I think there's one inside here. Yes. I think him first. And
Okay.
then, yeah.
I think I can be heard.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nigel Casimir from the CTU. And yes, we want to use AI, especially in terms of the mitigation side. You want to prepare and, so it's ready and plan properly. And of course, the data issue arises. Okay, do we have the data that we need to train the AI in whatever area? I can see you needing to collaborate with a slew of different departments, and maybe you could talk a bit about how we could get the data to make the AI work effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually where we are currently. And that's a very good question and a very informative comment. So right now, what we're doing is we are exploring the options of where some of the data is lodged. Of course, in Trinidad, especially when it comes to IoT devices, a lot of different agencies are doing work with such devices, especially experimenting with flooding and those things. We are trying to simulate that data currently to see how it works in the system. And while we are actually in talks with persons who are collecting that data, because really and truly, and one of the things I wanted to mention is this actually shows you the end product. And I always say I like to reverse engineer, means that we need to have more data. So we need to have like a data repository, because we will have satellite data that we could access online and these things. But other types of data, more internal data to train such a model, that's where we are now with actually looking to see where we get them. The social media data, I mean, we can actually get some of that online. Some of it you have to pay for and those types of things. But in some cases, we'll simulate some of that as well. So we actually pairing the real data with the simulations to see how the system works, while in the next few months, we seeing if we need to do data collection drives and that sort of thing to actually get some more of that data to make a more robust model. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
I see we have online Dr. Pablo Rodriguez. Your hand is up.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and greetings to all. More a comment than anything else, Dr. Addison, I commend you for the tremendous work that you're doing. As someone who is based in Puerto Rico and who suffered the devastation that both Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria, both Category 5s, unleashed on us, it was our structure, our infrastructure, our strong infrastructure and redundancy that allowed us to be resilient before, during, and post the hurricane. And this is something that TLD operators have to keep in mind very much so. So the kind of work that you're doing is excellent and is necessary, and we're looking forward to cooperate with you in any which way we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Good afternoon, Rodney Taylor, CTU. So very good presentation.
Yeah.
Very low.
Are you hearing it? Yeah.
It's on, but low.
I think. Yeah.
Testing.
Yeah.
We hear you well.
Congrats to the with respect to the award at COP29. I wanted to know if that was if the system is in production, if it's being used in the field, as it were, at the moment. And then just to share information as well with respect to our own initiative here, working along with the World Bank and the ITU on an early warning system using cell broadcasts within 5 member states of the OECS. So this is a project that will kick off very soon.
Yes.
And the objective is to leverage the mobile network to issue early warning systems within these member states. It's being funded by the World Bank. And we'll share more information as that project gets started. Thank you.
Nice. Okay. So based on the first part of what you asked, so we went through different levels of actually showcasing proposal that we want to have in the Caribbean region. And that was the winning proposal. And of course, now we have to deliver on that proposal. So the kind of support we would be getting from there, and in terms of some of the NGOs and some of the subsidiaries of the UN, would be more in terms of the computing resources, also Google Sustainability Hub. They would like us to also be part of an application hub. So we really want to create open source solutions with other countries who are creating open source solutions as well. So that's where we currently are in the stage of building a resilience case, a use case for flood resilience as part of the larger platform. And of course, some of this, we don't have to reinvent the wheel because other people are working on similar aspects. Like if you want to incorporate LLMs, etc., there are other countries who already have some of these ready-made systems that you could integrate also. And based on what you said, that's very interesting. And in terms of what you're doing with the World Bank, and I think that will be something that would be crucial for us, especially when you want to do the notification system as well, because that is really a large part of it. We want to reach the community, and we don't really want it to just sit on a website, and sit idly by. So I appreciate knowing that and hope to hear more about that and how we could be a part of that. Yeah, thanks. Yes, I think someone.
Hi, Tracy Hackshaw. Thank you for a really good presentation. Congratulations. That's you'd received.
Yeah.
A question I've had on these AI solutions, in terms of trying to figure out if we can use AI or models to go backwards. So not looking forward necessarily, but for example, I use the issue of flooding in Port of Spain, where we've tried many things over the last 50 years, all sorts of retention ponds and this, that, the other, clearing the drains. Seems to not solve the problem, right? But people seem to know the problem is, but they can't solve it. At least that's what they say. Studies have been done, etc. Would it not make sense to use the technology that's available now to review the solutions that have been proposed and deployed in the past, assess the relative success of each of them? And I would imagine that by applying some additional work on the technology, you can then figure out if there's a delta between the success or relative success and what would make it relative successful, let's say 50% or whatever, to close to 90, 100%. Do you think that's currently possible with the technology available today?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's such a multidisciplinary approach because we can't use it in isolation. A lot of the historical information, historical data, and all those risk assessments and things that you mentioned would have happened in the past. If we could kind of rate how well they worked, at least we can see what was the best solution, what was the one that wasn't working the best, and have various scenarios to kind of move from there to see how we can move forward. So I think training on all of that, and that's something, even when we were, one of the starting parts of this actually was, I was saying that, I probably remember that we have all of these reports in PDFs online. That was actually when the starting points of this. And I said, we have data from the World Bank and these places, but we also have a lot of reports that we're not even using in these models. So based on what you're saying, that is actually a huge part of how we can actually harness. And even from the generative AI perspective now, you could go and even interact with those past documents that you're speaking about and incorporate that sort of information and train on that as well. So I'm glad that you brought that point up, and I think that's very valid for this type of work.
Hi, David Antelexing. I just want to read some of the questions from the online chat. So, Lalu Amlaus asked, do you have a definitive project to deliver a solution, or are you still at finding out stage?
Right now, the project that we're working on within the next 6 to 9 months is a flood resilience use case as part of the larger platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and the second question from Shunana Sepa. Thanks, Dr. Letetia, for your presentation. Are you also looking at the electric power solutions needed during natural disasters?
That's excellent. We haven't looked at that yet, but I'm glad I will keep that as a note, because that will be important as well. Yeah.
Okay, Dev Gosain from TTMAG. Now, so in one of your presentations, you had some apps sharing data to the communities and so on.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of us in this room were in the British Virgin Islands in 2017. 1 week, or within the week of us departing from British Virgin Islands, they were struck with, I think it's Hurricane Maria.
Oh yeah, 27.
And what had happened is that while we were in Road Town, there was internet access. There was a lot of, you could have done anything online in the British Virgin Islands. I'm also wearing another hat as the Secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Amateur Radio Society. We were only able to talk to one of the hams amateur radio operators in BVI via radio. There was absolutely no way of communicating outside of the island. So how would these apps work in times like those?
Yeah, no, and understandable, because that's one of the challenges with limited connectivity and even areas that are very remote, right? Part of our proposal for the platform is also that we want to go back to being able to reach, have alerts that go to even radio. So it's covering all these different communications. So we not discounted. I am a firm believer that we still need to harness what we use traditionally. I don't believe that we should discommunicate from the traditional ways of reaching people. So in the larger platform that we want to build, we want to be able to see how we can send alerts out to not only through internet, through SMS, texts, radio, and all these various channels. Because as you mentioned, during a natural disaster, more than likely, you will lose connectivity. So that's a key point.
Right. One of the things that I'm getting at really.
Yeah.
All these radio, even our best radio transmitters, do you know where they are located?
In Port of Spain.
Where in Port of Spain?
Town.
On the northern range.
Yeah.
And on the central range.
Yeah,
they are the highest point.
Yeah.
Therefore, they will be the worst affected.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what is happening.
Yeah.
The main communication channels will be down.
Mm-hmm.
Your cell phone will be worse off than a stone as a paperweight.
Yeah.
It's an expensive paperweight. So the point I'm making is that while it's, I want to commend you on the work that you have done, and it's amazing. I'm glad to see it's going that way. But there's a saying, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And we could have all the plans. And I think one of the, I remember back in, and we remember this project long before, this was I think 92 or 93, Prof. We were using Netscape to communicate via radio, over a radio link. That's my first, the internet wasn't even Trinidad at the time, okay? And that's my first exposure to using TCP/IP over radio, and that sort of stuff, okay? So one of the things that I am advocating, and this is where I wear my hat now as the Secretary of the Amateur Radio Society,
yes,
is to build that resilience through things like the disaster management units that we have in Trinidad.
Yeah.
Right? To set up communication, modes of communication that do not depend on what we know as hardcore infrastructure that we depend on right now. Internet, commercial radio, and all that sort of thing, because that will no longer be there. Ask the people in BVI. They will tell you. And even our good friend Pablo in Puerto Rico. Okay? They will tell you. The US had to come in there and do a lot of work. But I'm glad he has redundancy. So, unfortunately, we don't even have the first thing here, far more redundancy in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
No, and thank you very much for that comment. I mean, and you raise an important point. And while we can't always have what we need within the actual emergency, as well as you mentioned, and we do have a meeting with ODPM next week, so I will make sure to make that point, what you mentioned. The system also is for you to learn before the disaster happens. So you'll be interacting with it and asking it scenarios. So we kind of want to, in SMART, don't want to tell the people to educate them, but they'll be educating in SMART. So in that way, they will learn when these things happen, as you mentioned, the scenarios. If this goes down, you can do A, B, and C, and you can contact these numbers and have all of that information kind of lodged in your mind beforehand as well. So we kind of want to educate them beforehand a little bit more than just the general knowledge that we have. So I take your point in good stead, and I think that's an important point to mention when we have those meetings, stakeholder meetings. But thank you very much.
And I wish to thank all of our participants for all the very critical and relevant questions that have been asked here today. Dr. Addison, we wish you all the best. I think your work is absolutely timely, relevant, and crucial for our small island developing states. I just want to also make a plug as the acting president of NEHRS. We occupy a very unique space in government. Our space helps us to formulate policy, and our mandate is the use and application of science and technology. We are here to help you whenever you need us.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Turning over now to our break. Thank you.